Hey, Jason Journeyman here, and I have a really cool project for you to do today. We're going to dissect a flower. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, pause this video and go back to the one I posted just before this about flowers and pollinators and about their symbiotic relationship. So we have pollinators like bees and butterflies and birds, and they get nectar from the flower. That's one of their food sources. That's how they eat. And in turn, when they go into the flower to get that nectar, the flower gets pollen moved from one part to the other, so the plant is able to reproduce. The flower is able to make a seed, and we get baby plants. And that's called a symbiotic relationship. They're both working together in order to help each other survive. So I'm gonna dissect this hibiscus flower that I have from my yard. If you don't have a good trumpet-shaped flower in your yard, you want a big, wide one so you can see all the parts. You can get one from the store, something like a daylily. And if the plants in your yard belong to your parents, please ask for permission before cutting off a flower. So, first things first, gather all your tools from around the house. I got out a steak knife, also a box cutter in case I need a more precise cut. Be careful with this for sure. These can be really sharp. Make sure it's closed when you're not using it. I also have a pen and a pencil. I have a clear roll of tape, like Scotch tape. You could choose your own tape dispenser. I got one piece of paper, color of your choice, but you can make it fabulous. And of course, we have the flower that I'm going to dissect. Now it's time to chop this beautiful little flower up so we can get a look at what's inside. And we're gonna start at the base where the flower meets the stem. And this area is called the receptacle. Now, these little green leaf looking parts at the bottom, they're called the sepals. And we're going to remove them one by one. When the flower is still a bud and the flower inside is just developing and growing, these sepals are there to protect the flower. It's like their armor. Now that we've got those all off, we're going to keep working our way in, and we're going to start by removing the petals of the flower. Those are the pretty, beautiful parts that we always see out and about. And see that little red part right in there? That is the nectar. That is the nectar that bees and hummingbirds and birds like to eat. They get their nourishment. It's basically a sugar water, and it's kind of sticky. So as I'm taking this apart, my fingers are getting more and more sticky. Different parts are going to start sticking to it, and that's because of the nectar that's inside of there. These flower petals are essential. The bright colors and the sweet nectar is how the plant attracts pollinators to come in and move pollen from one part to the other so that it can make seeds and new baby plants. Next thing I'm gonna do is remove the flower from the stem. And I'm using my box cutter. Be careful with those, they're sharp. But what we have left is on one side a stem and some leaves, and on the other side, the inner workings of the flower, the little parts in the inside there. I'm gonna pop the receptacle off. This is basically the cup that holds the flower together. It connects it to the stem, and it holds all the petals in place. And geez, this is super sticky. Every time I'm trying to do this, different parts are sticking to my fingers from that nectar. We've got these two sides here now. I've cut it in half and they will not stop sticking to my fingers. Now we're gonna pause here and zoom in a little bit. We have two sides here. And once we flip this one side over, we can see the inner workings. We can see the two reproductive parts. On the bottom is the female parts. It's the stigma on the right, those little brown caps, and then we have the style that is holding them up. Together, they form what is called the pistil. And so those are the female parts of the flower, and on the top we have the male parts of the flower. We have the anther here on the right with the yellow. That is where the pollen is made and is stored. And the stem that's holding the anther up is called the filament, and together they are called the stamen. So when a pollinator comes in here, it moves pollen from the anther to the stigma, and that's how baby plants are made. Now we have taken apart our flower, we've dissected it, and it's time to put it back together. So we're gonna get out our tape and get out our piece of paper. I like this pink construction paper I have because it just makes the colors like pop of this particular flower, but choose something that works for you. And we're going to rearrange this flower back into something like its original state, something that we can use to diagram what each part is called. And we can write it down on the paper. And we're gonna tape each part to the paper. So let's start with the petals. Tape each one of these down. Now I'm gonna do a little more arranging of this flower because while we put it back here onto this piece of paper, we want it to look like it does in real life, right? So we have the pistil and we have the stamen in the center, and right below them is the ovary. And this is at the base of the pistil. This is where the seed is made. In many plants, this part is what becomes fruit. So like a tomato or like an apple. That is the ovary growing the seeds inside of it after it was pollinated. I'm going to tape these pieces down too. And next it is time to tape down the sepals, the flower bud armor. Now we have our receptacle as well. If you remember, that is the base of the flower, the little cup that holds everything together. We're going to tape that down, and last after that we have the leaf and the stem. Tape those down. And now we have every part, but we can't see what those parts are. We just have to remember. So to help us remember, let's write it down. I'll show you this at the end so you can get an idea of what each name of a part is. But you can also go back into my video and review the name of each part to help you fill in all of the names of all of the parts of the flower. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la la la. And it looks like we did it. Here is my dissection diagram of a hibiscus flower from my backyard. And here it is, dissected flower diagram. All of the parts are in there. Each one is an essential element to how a flowering plant, how this particular flowering plant reproduces. And I believe when you take things apart and put them back together again, using your own hands, that's how you really get to see how the world works. In this case, how this plant, the hibiscus, reproduces, makes seeds, makes baby hibiscus plants. This is how flowering plants work. Other kinds of plants like conifers that make pine cones, like pine trees, or other plants that reproduce just based off of their roots, they have their whole own way of reproducing. And once you start to learn all these different ways, You start to see the diversity of the plant world. You start to see all the different ways in which we figure out how to survive on this planet. And that goes for humans as well, all the animal species as well. We all have our own way of surviving. And you get to see it firsthand when you do it this way. So I hope you had fun making this art project and science project, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you love nature like I do, check out my YouTube channel and my IGTV at Jason Journeyman. I'm an outdoor environmental educator and I love to teach. It's good for kids of all ages. I'll see you soon.